Hi and welcome to today's talk. So today's topic will be what challenges does a project manager typically face and how do they overcome them? Now, there are lots and lots of challenges that we will discuss that the project manager faces, and hopefully today's video will cover a very brief overview of some of those areas, which I think it doesn't matter what field you're in, are pretty generic and are probably encountered by majority of project managers. So first one is scope creep. Now, this is a real good one. There's what's the definition of scope creep? So let's cover that first. So scope creep is where you've defined the project and you set out the outline of what you're going to deliver. And whilst you go through this project, people are saying, "Oh, actually, we didn't think about an idea. We add this on. We didn't think about this. Well, let's add that on. We didn't think about this. We add that on." And before you know it, you've added so many things to your project that you suddenly what you defined initially and what you're actually now delivering becomes very, very different. And those are things that creep in, which add more time, possibly cost and effort, and push on resources. And 99% of the time, we'll also look at extending the project timeline, which generally doesn't help. So it's really important to understand that scope creep when it does appear is managed correctly. It will definitely impact budget. There are very few occasions, in my opinion, is that where it doesn't cost you something, whether it's budget, time, or resource, or quality in some cases, is key to understand. So understanding what these items are, and making sure that they actually add value to your project. um, Now, how do we prevent scope creep? Now, when I say prevent, I mean sometimes things that you think of that weren't thought of originally will add value to your project, but it needs to be managed. You need to make sure that it's applied to your project correctly, that you're making sure that before you make a decision to add something in, that you've really thought about the impact. So simply just saying, prime example, let's say we've got a car that you're building, and suddenly say, actually, you know what, we're gonna now add um, an extra gear into the gearbox, but we never thought about the design and expenditure, etc. that comes out. So therefore, what you don't realize is that that simple idea, which you think is good, could say which will say, let's say, provides efficiency to the car, etc. But that efficiency comes at a cost. What is that cost to the company? It's time. How long will it take us to apply this change? Um, is there a cost associated? Yes, there'll be a cost, or we have to change the gearbox or whatever it is to make it more functional, to apply this efficiency. And how much time will it take? Or is it going to take us 1 week, or is it going to take us 6 months? Who knows? And how much resource will that cost? So all those things need to be considered and then manage through change control. Now, those are things that we need to do. So if something comes into effect, we add the design. You just don't simply add it. It has to go through a process where it's governed. You've reviewed it, you've understood it, you've put the costings through, and you think it's a good idea, and then you present it as a change control within your project, and then you make sure that everybody's agreed it. And then once it's been agreed, it's then applied to your project. And as a project manager, you then look at your plan and amend it. Now, that is the ideal scenario, but in reality, what happens is that you get the idea in the background, you start thinking about it, and then you do the change control alongside that if it's agreed. And then sometimes it goes to your favor and sometimes it doesn't. But in traditional views, you will make sure you do your change control before you do anything. And there are some companies that do this very strictly, and that's where they always have good control. But there are now we're trying to be more agile. These things need to happen alongside each other, whilst you're moving things forward. So yeah, scope creep is a big one for all project managers, which has a major impact on what you're doing. Next one is communication. So communication is a big one. You need to, as part of your project manager, the challenges you will face is that you have multiple people to communicate with. How you communicate with these people is a challenge. What method you use, not everybody responds to emails. Some people like to talk face to face. Some people like lengthy meetings. Some people like short meetings, etc. Is just knowing how you control that communication is very, very key. Um, and understanding what your stakeholders within your project really want out of your project plan, and your delivery as a communication method. Um, and those vary per people. I mean, I'm currently working on a project where some people love talking about things, um, but there's some people who just sit behind emails and are, as we call them, the keyboard warriors, who just do not like sitting in meetings. And you have to manage that type of expectation. And there are some people who like the detail as well, and you need to understand that as well. So how you communicate is very, very key. So there's lots of communication challenges. The one thing you can have is misunderstanding, poor documentation, or lack of feedback. Let's look at misunderstandings, and that happens a lot. Uh, as a project manager, you need to understand people's skill set, how much they are understand, how much they learn about what we're doing, and you then need to be able to articulate that in a fashion that makes sense. So, I use network analogy where people say, "Oh, what does network traffic mean?" I go, "Well, think of it like a motorway where you've got multiple people driving, and then as it gets busy, more and more cars get on, and therefore that's what you call network traffic." So that was kind of explaining a technical term into a simple term where everybody understands what you're trying to articulate. Um, so those are keys. One of the other thing is you need to look at how you improve your communication. Clearly, you need to clearly define people's roles and responsibilities within your project, which will help you understand how best to communicate. So, for example, look at somebody at a very senior level doesn't want uh, a lengthy email. They want bullet points, straight to the point issue question, so they can read the email quickly and efficiently, because they don't have time to read lengthy documents. But somebody who's technical will need something in more detail. For example, somebody in engineering, for example, construction, need technical drawings, so they need the detail, for example, just so that they can understand what we're expecting and understand the risk. So really understanding how you communicate to those people, and ultimately you can create a communication plan. There's multiple ways of doing this, but it does support your strategy, and it makes and if you've got multiple stakeholders, a communication plan is key. It will make you understand who you need to talk to, how and when, as well, and their frequency. Next is risk management. Now, throughout your whole project life cycle, you will need to manage risk. And what definition of risk is really something that you foresee that might impact your project, which could have a cost, time, or some sort of a delay on your project, that could impact, that you need to manage. Those things you need to really, really be careful. How do you manage risk? You've just got to foresee everything. You can't, stand corrected that you can't foresee everything, but what you can do is try and look ahead and understand what could come your way. Sometimes you'll get risks that just appear when you're working through stuff, and you have to manage it on the spot and say, okay, well, you accept the risk or you don't. There are risks that you can foresee, for example, people on holiday, resources being not available, supply chain issues. There could be you doing an international delivery, realizing that your transport mechanism might be compromised due to civil unrest, etc. There's all sorts of things that you could foresee. However, strategies that I would recommend for identifying risk is just using your daily stand-ups. If you're doing a sprint run, your RAID logs, which are risks, actions, issues, and dependencies throughout your project, keep tracking those. Talk to your people, communication, like we spoke about earlier. Talk to the people around you. Each person that's in your project that has a specialist skill set will probably have experienced some sort of risk as part of their role, which can articulate back into your project. You, as a project manager, you have to understand that you are not meant to know everything. So that briefly covers risk management. The other one, next one, is resource allocation. Now, resources are your lifeblood for getting things done in your project. And really, allocating resources at the right time, at the right place, when you need them, is an art form in itself. Understanding your internal processes, etc. And those are the key elements, really, to help you understand when you need resources. So, first thing first is a nice project plan, which at least gives you an indication of all the activities you want. Assign those resources to your project plan, and then you can understand defining the processes behind those, the way you need to request those resources, or make sure they're aware of those resources, etc. I would recommend that you actually focus on certain things whilst you're looking to determine where your resources are needed, etc. And those are key. Keeping a foresight on your project and understanding and notifying your resources. Again, going back to communication and risk management here, understanding when you need these people, etc., to do pieces of work for you. Now, again, if you got a project plan, you can foresee when you need people. There will be delays, there will be impact, but resource allocation is really, really key. Next one is time management. Explanation of really how to manage project timelines effectively. This is how do you really do that? I think my key is, depending on the size of your projects, if it's a complicated project plan is key. Understanding these activities, because you are not going to remember everything. You need to make sure that you boxed it in, and sprints are really good for this. Where you run sprints, you can do it over a short period of time. You can manage those really effectively. But when you've got the traditional form of projects where you are managing the whole project as a whole, you have to break it down and make sure people are allocated within time and schedules, etc. So common challenges are like missed deadlines, delays, inadequate planning. Now, inadequate planning is a key one, and you should always do this as part of your initial project. Spend time really picking at your resources, which are the ones that will be working on your project, to understand the challenges. The more you understand in your planning stage, the easier you can manage your time and your risks as well. So missing a deadline, that's going to happen. I guarantee it. It's never going to be dead on time. There are occasions where you will do it, and that's because you through experience you've learned things. You are better at doing stuff, but you will always have incidences where you miss deadlines. So how do you manage that? How are you going to make sure? And again, missing a deadline, if you're going to miss it, notify the right people, get ahead of yourself, and let people know within your team that they are going to miss deadlines, especially senior stakeholders, and that be open and honest about what you're saying. There are multiple strategies for effective time management. Regular monitoring updates. So I would say, daily stand-ups if you're doing sprints, which is fantastic. But again, be sharp, to the point, and be efficient with your meetings. Stick to the point. Make sure you are documenting your actions so that you are able to track where you're going. Again, regular monitoring from yourself and your team on a weekly, daily basis, if need be, depending on the project or where you are with activities. If somebody's delayed, if you've got 10 things that need doing on day one, then you've got to make sure they're all done, because that could impact day 2, day 5, whatever. So keeping that regular, constant review is very, very important. And now there are multiple methods that you can do, but again, keeping on top of what you do, understanding what the next steps are, try to think 2-3 steps ahead, and you will effectively make sure that time management is within your remit to keep. However, I would put a realistic view. If it's around deadlines, etc., there always will be a challenge. There are people. There's so many balls to juggle that you will drop one ball. It's how you manage that ball that you dropped and get it back on track. That's the key. So that concludes the discussion today. If as a small recap, we've covered areas such as the scope creep, really good one, common problem, your communication, risk management, and resource allocation and time management. I hope that was helpful, and hopefully see you on the next one.